This episode includes discussions of sexual assault, trauma, and recovery. While we won't discuss specific experiences in detail, these topics may be difficult for some listeners to hear. Please take care as you listen, and if you need to pause or step away, we encourage you to do so. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Catalysts for Change, the show where we explore the stories, strategies, and turning points of leaders driving meaningful impact in their communities and across the country. I'm Adam Lister, and I'm so glad you're here. Today's guest is a business leader and community advocate whose story is as courageous as it is inspiring. Alex Nelson leads supply chain at Asurion, a global tech care company based in Nashville, and has more than a decade of experience in corporate finance and strategy. Beyond her corporate role, she serves on the board of the Nashville Sexual Assault Center, where she has chaired both the legislative and development committees, co-chaired the organization's largest fundraising event, and become a voice for hope for survivors. Recently recognized by In Focus magazine as an emerging leader in philanthropy, Alex is a reminder that our most powerful stories often come from the most challenging places, and that vulnerability, empathy, and strategy, when combined, can drive real change. In today's episode, we'll talk about her journey from trauma to triumph, the power of therapy, and how leading with empathy and authenticity can ripple far beyond ourselves. Let's dive in. Alex, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So people sometimes know us first by what we do. Mm-hmm. But for the listeners who may not know you yet, tell us a little bit about yourself beyond your job title and board roles. Who are you?
So I have been in Nashville for 10 years. I moved here from Alabama, where I attended the University of Alabama, Huntsville. So I moved here for work. I've loved Nashville. I spend a lot of time with my friends. I have a wonderful cat named Pluto. I love community service. I've been engaged in community service for almost the full 10 years that I've been here through various organizations, starting with just volunteering, and then now I'm on a board position. So that's something that's been very important to me during my time here, and that's a good kind of summary of me, I think.
My children are regular listeners to this podcast, and I think we're going to have to edit out that section. We've got dogs in the house, and my daughter has been an advocate for many years to bring in a cat.
I support her.
It's a challenge.
Special. They're special. You got to get one.
The journey that brought you here, both personally and professionally, when you think about that, what is part of your story that you believe most defines who you are and how you drive change?
I think a lot of how I drive change is from a seat of empathy, of knowing that we're all human and we all go through various things that aren't always obvious on the surface. One of the first volunteer events I did, or like organizations I was involved with in Nashville, was the YWCA. And I did family literacy tutoring there in math. And I remember speaking with this woman. She grabbed me after we were done tutoring and she said, "Hey, I've never understood math before you took the time to explain it to me." And that just felt so good, because it was like, wow, I'm just here to try to help. Like, I didn't know that I would be potentially changing this woman's life, because she went on to tell me, if I can get my GED, then I can get a promotion and I can do more with my life. And she shared with me about how she had been in a domestic violence situation, as had her mother, as had her sister. And it was just this cyclical thing that she couldn't get out of. And it was something at the time I didn't fully understand how alike we were, but I felt this like physical sense, like, oh, you and I are not that different. You're on one side of the table, I'm on the other. One's teaching and one's learning, but you and I don't have that different of life experience. We just have very different outcomes, probably due to the resources we had available. So I just find that speaking to different people and learning about their story has helped me recognize parts of my own story that allow me to come forward and like lead with a different energy and empathy than maybe I would otherwise had I not had those conversations.
Could you share a little bit about your background and how your professional career at Asurion has helped shape the way you think about leadership and strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love Asurion. I think that I've learned a lot there about communicating effectively, and it is a very like human first company. So the individuals I work with are all very wonderful people. And in terms of leadership, I think that I've learned a lot about servant leadership, and that the only difference between myself and like one of my people, like my team, isn't so much that we have a different title. It's more like I just am able to support them in a different way from a higher level of strategic thinking. And in that, it's always been like a very people first focused leadership style for me. Like I want to see them do better than me. So I'm just very engaged in that. And Asurian is very much like the same type of leadership all throughout.
You are different than many of the guests we've had here in that you are balancing a demanding corporate professional career and you have a deep level of community involvement, whereas many of our guests are leaders of nonprofit organizations or foundations.
Keeps me very busy.
It does. What drew you to board service in addition to managing this professional career, and what specifically to the Sexual Assault Center?
Yeah, so I didn't address my trauma until it was more than 15 years after the fact. And I wasn't until it was like 2 or 3 years into therapy that we even started to touch on it. And so going through therapy for sexual trauma really changed my life because it helped me have a different story than the one I was living. And it gave me a perspective that I am more than my trauma and that healing is actually possible, especially when you're able to share that with someone you trust, like a therapist or a friend or whoever. So that was a very pivotal moment in my life. And at the near end of my therapy, we all still are in therapy, but with that particular therapist, I was like, oh, I just feel so empowered. And like, I want to start this nonprofit where, survivors can come and they can get free therapy and they get free resources and maybe even legal services. And he was like, that is such a beautiful dream. It already exists. It's called the Sexual Assault Center. And I was like, great, I got to get involved. And so the very first thing I did with the Sexual Assault Center was I went and I organized their art room. And so nothing too grand or like huge donation or, big event, nothing special. But it was just like, as soon as I walked into the building, I was like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be here. And so I just started becoming more and more involved with things they were doing, events. And I happened to be at a breakfast they were hosting. And I bumped into one of the board members and he was like, you should join the Young Leaders Council, which is a program here in Nashville that develops you and trains you for 6 weeks, 9 weeks. Kim James, don't kill me if I forget that. She's wonderful. To be on a board. And I went into that knowing like, oh, I'm going to be on the Sexual Assault Center's board if I do this. And I got accepted into the program and I got onto the board and I was like, this is amazing. I get to be at a different level of leadership. As much as I truly believe being in the art room and organizing it was as meaningful as anything else, I was excited to step into a role where I got to see a broader perspective of how the organization was working and serving.
We'll talk about this in a little bit, but I think it aligns with your premise of just jump in.
Yeah.
You show up and you get engaged in ways that may feel small in the macro, but it's a way for you to get an entrance into the organization and for others to get to know you and say, this is a person who's invested in our mission and is willing to help advance the work that we're doing. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think there's like no good deed too small. I think that if someone's interested in helping out, whatever the cause may be, I think we all have individual causes that are special to us for our own stories and our own walks of life. Literally anything you can do to help goes so far in the nonprofit world because the resources are limited in different ways, whether that's financial or just hourly, like having the hands on deck. So I think it's really important just to find something that you believe in and just do a little bit for them. It goes a long way.
You've talked about finding alignment through your work with the SAC, and I want to explore that a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Specifically, I'm thinking about a moment that you shared before about co-chairing their large fundraising event, the Mad Hatter Gala. You delivered deeply personal remarks to a room of 300 people, many of them strangers.
Yes.
What was that moment like for you? And what did it feel like when you stepped outside or stepped off stage after speaking those remarks to that room?
Gosh, that was a huge moment for me in my life. So as I kind of mentioned a few moments ago, I didn't start working through my trauma until 15 years after it happened, and a couple years of therapy. And when I hosted that event, which was 3 years ago now, if you would have told me 5 years prior to that, hey, you're going to one day stand in front of 300 people and talk about your experience, I would have been like, you're lying. There's no way. Because I was convinced from the moment my trauma happened that I was like, oh, I'll die with this. I will take this to my grave. No one will ever know. I'll never talk about it. I'll bury it deep, and which caused its own issues. But then there I was being able to express it in front of, a very large group of strangers, because I knew and I recognized as I was writing that speech, the power in a story and how privileged I had been to be able to afford the resources to get the help that I needed years prior that even led me to that stage. And so it was this very surreal moment of like, everything I've been fortunate enough to have to work through this is coming to fruition right now. And these individuals should hear that, because real change and hope is possible for survivors who go through significant amounts of trauma. That painful chapter of their life does not have to be the entire story. And when they're able to get the resources they need, they can write a different ending. And that's what I've been able to do too. And so it felt very important for me to do this call to action, to be like, this is possible. I'm proof of it. Consider that when you donate in a few moments, you're helping individuals just like me have a different chance at a life. And I shared in that moment that, I thought it was something I would take to the grave. So when I stepped out, so I spoke, gave a few hugs, stepped out, and I just had this moment of like, oh, wow, this is like, it wasn't overwhelming. It was very grounding. I was like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. This is a wonderful, beautiful event full of wonderful people who care. And so they did the rest of the program, which was Fund the Need and to raise money. And then afterwards, several survivors came up to me, including one who said, hey, I've never told anyone either. And your story really makes me feel like that's possible for me. And I was like, I really hope you do, because you deserve to be free from that. And I hope that they did.
How did that encounter impact you and affirm your sense of purpose and advocacy? You obviously had an intimate moment with that individual. But broadly, how did it empower that broader sense of purpose?
Yeah, I think that in nonprofit work, from my experience, it can be very heavy. For a minute, I was helping the center write grants. And so that required me to be very involved in the statistics, which are dismal, very involved in different stories, which are often painful. It's just a very heavy topic that in order to push for change, you really do have to be very involved in and understand it intimately and deeply. And so when I was able to have that conversation with that person, I still reflect on that in moments where it feels really heavy, because I truly believe every survivor, every person who's been impacted by trauma deserves to have a different story than the one that feels thrust upon them. And like, I think that remembering that people out there are inspired by other stories is very powerful. I think it's important not to get too caught up in your story, which can happen, but sharing and creating a sense of community around, hey, you're not alone. I truly understand what you're going through is a deeply healing thing. And I feel very privileged to be in a space on the board and here in this room, speaking about that to encourage others that they're not alone and that healing is possible. And that really motivates me.
So in that moment, you've talked about feeling like you were doing exactly what you needed to be doing. And we've talked a little bit about how it powers you personally in your advocacy. But how do you carry that sense of alignment into your work with the center and beyond, within that boardroom, within the leadership and the engagement that you have with nonprofits around this work?
Yeah, I think that I try to carry that in how I always try to lead with empathy, which to me means keeping the people at the center of whatever work I'm doing, whether that's raising money through fundraising, working on legislative items on the legislative committee that I'm on. It's how are we serving these survivors as carefully as possible to make sure that their stories and that their perspectives are kept whole and dignified and at the forefront of our mission. And then I carry that even into like my corporate life too. It's like, how do I make sure that I'm keeping my people at the center of what we're all doing here, right? It's a job, it's great, but it's really about the people and how we develop and work with one another. And creating a sense of community, I think, is very important wherever you go in leadership.
What have you found to be both personally and broadly your most effective strategies in developing that sense of community?
I think just really trying to understand who you're working with. So like at the center, it's always a privilege to be able to hear about the work that they're doing, hearing from the staff who are wonderful, what they're working on, what feels meaningful to them, what feels like it's most important to them, so that we then as a board or as an advocate coming and sitting on a podcast can articulate that well to other people who care. And then just making sure that there's a real relationship there. And because with sexual violence and trauma in general, I think there's a risk of the more you're exposed to it and in the work, you can become kind of numb to it, and you can kind of forget that, oh, these are real people's lives who have been through something traumatic and horrible.
Not just statistics that
They're
you're
not just
reviewing for a grant.
statistics. That's exactly right. And I think that it's very important to come back to these are real people that matter, and their journey matters, and their whatever they want to be and however they want to be is very important. Let's keep that at the forefront, not just assigning them to whatever statistic helps us move a mission or a program or bill forward, which the Sexual Assault Center does very well.
That moment on stage at the Mad Hatter Gala was so powerful. You've also spoken, though, about another turning point that happened away from the spotlight, and that was your decision to seek help and to go to therapy. That decision has obviously shaped your journey because it's informed a lot of the things that you've done since then. And you've described it as one of the most pivotal decisions of your life.
Yes.
Why was that so significant, and how has it changed you as a person and as a leader?
I think it was so significant to me because had I not chosen to go to therapy, I would have just stayed in this very dark hole of not really feeling like an active participant in my life and just being lost in depression and anxiety. And then when I was able to finally ask for help, which is a challenging thing for me to do, I began to really see that a different life was possible. And it wasn't even all about the trauma, right? It was more, there's plenty of other things that I worked through in therapy, right? That allowed me to have the choice of the life that I wanted to live versus feeling like life was just happening to me. And so being able to work through all the things and continuing to work through things, right? It's allowed me to really open my eyes that just the humanity of it all. Like, we're all human. We all have different things in our closets that we want to avoid. And if we're lucky, we'll find someone who is able to help us explore that closet a little bit and safely, which I think therapy is great for. I'm a huge advocate for mental health, and I think it's really important to have access to that because I'm living proof that being able to do that work leads to a better life.
A lot of high achievers, folks that pride themselves on independence, struggle to ask for help, whether it is in their work, whether it's around the house, or in things that require more intentionality to address moments of trauma and healing. Mm-hmm. What would you say to those folks, especially those high achievers or those people that really do struggle and pride themselves on independence, that it's okay to ask for others to come in and to help in areas where you need a little bit of extra support? Yeah.
I mean, candidly, I would be like, hey, pot, kettle, I get it, but there's no prize at the end of this thing for not having asked for help. There's no gold medal you get, when the time comes that says you never asked for help. Good job, right? And I think I keep kind of coming back to community and the importance of sharing your story, whether that's whatever the story is, with a friend, with a therapist, with a parent, with whoever is meaningful to you and like is trusted. That sense of community is so healing. Like, we are designed for connection. So to be able to find that in a safe place helps us work through all of the things. No one gets out of this world unscathed, right? So it helps us work through that. And the independence thing, I understand. It feels good to be able to be self-sufficient, but it feels even better to be able to lean on one another and to be someone that people can lean on, which I think is only possible if you lean on other people.
Yeah, I think in my experience as a leader of a nonprofit and in other aspects of my professional career, I've always prided myself on self-sufficiency and independence. But if I'm being completely honest, some of that also comes from an anxiousness of showing failure to others.
Sure.
And if I fail privately, I'm the only one that knows it. It's harder to fail publicly when you've invited a lot of others or even a small group of others into a circle. And when you're trying to drive change, I think it's important to lift beyond just your own fears of failing publicly to say, we're trying to do something for a community that matters. We're trying to drive a social change. If I want to do the thing that I say I want to do, it's critical to invite other people into that problem because I can't do it alone. And failure isn't just failure for me. It's failure for the cause that I want to see changed or the solution that I want to see addressed.
Yeah. And I would even say too, that's such a great point. And also it's like, oh, if I fail alone, then it's only my problem. But it's like, it does come out. Your mood will be different. You'll act different. Even if you're like, no, I've got this under control. It's all internal. Like therein is the issue with like trauma in itself and failure and shame, which is such a powerful like emotion and experience. It's, I will hold this all in. I will keep it together and everything will be fine. And it's like, well, that kind of leaks out in different ways, whether it's how you talk to people or how you carry yourself, or maybe your decisioning is a little bit off. And it's like, you deserve to take a breath, and that can be done by sharing with somebody else and saying like, okay, this isn't like the end of the world if something doesn't go right. And I don't have to hold this all in by myself. There's other people that I can share it with to live a fuller life because of it. Yeah,
as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about a conversation that happened about 4 or 5 years ago that feels as fresh as 4 or 5 minutes ago. It's 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night, and I am just grinding on my laptop, probably the most stressful period of my professional career over about a 6-month period of time. And my wife came into the room, said something to me, and I don't remember exactly what she said. I don't remember exactly what I responded with, but it wasn't patient. It wasn't generous. It wasn't kind.
Yeah.
And the look that she gave me, it was a good thing that there was some distance between us physically. And it was, I don't know what's going on with you, which she did at a broad sense. Like she knew the things that were on my plate, but this isn't going to work. You've got to figure out how to address the kind of core drivers of the things that are affecting you. And I think to your point, I had all of this stress under control and all of these issues under control for everyone except for my family. Yeah. And ironically, that was the place I wanted it to leak out the least. And unfortunately, they were the ones, not consistently, but on a fair amount of occasions, were experiencing the cracks in that impenetrable surface that would leak out.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of, we've talked a little bit about like leading with authenticity as well. It's really hard to be authentic if you've got turmoil inside and it's something you're either ignoring or not coping with or unable to cope with. It's hard to deal with any amount of stress, right? Much less trauma on your own. But I think leading with authenticity is so important. I preach that to my team at work a lot, like be who you are, be yourself. Like that's what people respond to because you are so uniquely you. And that's a gift that we all get to share in. But if you're bogged down with things you're not talking about, it's like, well, there's a level of authenticity that's stripped away because you're not allowing those close to you or those who can help see inside that, yeah, it's not all, sunshine and roses sometimes. And that's okay. That's life.
Let's talk about that leadership with authenticity and compassion a little bit. You've said that some of your greatest leadership lessons have come from working with powerful women who lead with empathy and compassion. What did they teach you, and how has that influenced your own style?
Yeah, so I think that so many wonderful people I know are coming to mind right now, but like Rachel Freeman, CEO of SAC, she's just such a wonderful example of facing challenges on a day-to-day basis, whether it's in the work that she is, leading, or some of the legislative work that she does with her team. She leads with empathy because, again, she always keeps the mission of the survivor's best interest at hand. And she also, which I think is something I've learned from her, is even when you're at an opposition, something's not going well, maybe it's funding related, maybe it's legislative related, whatever, is holding empathy for that as well and understanding for that as well, which I try to do my best at. I can be a little fiery, so sometimes I don't always hold my opposition's best interest at heart, but I do try to learn from her in that, and coming back to the humanity of what are we trying to do here, and how do we focus on that before we get lost in any of the other, nonsense that's going on in the moment. Also, I think there's a lot of power with women in my life that I've learned from, is just like bringing people up with you. So part of the reason I got involved with Mad Hatter was I went to Mad Hatter, I guess it was 4 years ago now. So the year before I chaired it, and I was just put at a table. I didn't know anybody at the table. Lorraine McGuire, VP of Marketing at Community Relations at SAC, said, I think this is a good table for you. I'm going to put you at this table. And I met my friend Anastasia, who's a great, dear friend to me now. And she said, I can bring you onto the committee. We'll get you involved. And that, I can bring you into the circle. I can bring you into the fold. I'm here because of it, right? Like, I'm talking to you, and I'm talking about this very important thing that I've been through and many others have been through, because someone said, I can bring you along, and I can show you, whatever you want to know. And I think that's again, going back to that community, it's very important, and it's very appreciated when you can connect with people like that and help them.
So let me ask you a tougher question about empathy and compassion. You alluded to having that for folks that are on the opposite side of an issue, business, philanthropy, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
How do you balance empathy and compassion with purpose and strategy, and, hey, we've got to get through these things to accomplish this mission, and where there may be a pace of empathetic leadership that is misaligned with the realities of a calendar or the realities of the political moment or the realities of the financial circumstances that you're in. How do you square those things when on their face they may seem like that they are in conflict, that it's hard to give full service to one and also achieve the other?
Yeah, that's tough. So I try to live my life. I try to practice mindfulness and awareness as much as possible, which serves me in many, many ways, especially in business and in leadership. And I try to adopt a way of thinking when I'm being challenged. It's both and, not either or. So something can be both really powerful and important and uplifting and challenging and faced with opposition or uncertainty. Two things can be true at once. So I lean on that a lot whenever I'm facing a certain issue or trying to solve a problem. It's like not to get too narrow in my thinking so that I can hold all that is true at once. I also find it very important to blow off steam. So if I am working on something and it's frustrating to me, I have someone I trust that I can go to and be like, listen to all the reasons that I think this is not good. And they'll be like, are you done? I'm like, I'm good. I can get back to it now. Again, going back to like having someone you trust that you can confide in about the silliest things, different personalities, different calendars, different political climates, to the very important things is, I think, very important in being able to authentically step through whatever problem you're trying to solve, because otherwise you're all wrapped up in, I don't like this. I haven't been able to like talk about why this doesn't feel like it's working. I think we need to honor ourselves in being heard all the time. of course, in the right moment and time and place. But I think honoring yourself for being heard for all that is true for you is very important in how you show up to leadership.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think having some folks that allow you to have a tea kettle moment every once in a while is valuable. A little bit different because it's going to be hard to see empathy and compassion in political hand-to-hand combat. But people that know me will hear me say often that I always believe there's a way to win a political battle ethically and legally, but we shouldn't conflate or confuse ethical and legal with gentle and passive.
Agree.
And I think the same is true here in just kind of a nicer lens, but that it's a lazy approach to think we have to be either empathetic or strategic.
Agree 100%.
Legal or passive and illegal, whatever the case may be. And it is inherently lazy and kind of a half-hearted approach to solve the problem if you think you have to do one or the other, as opposed to the both and.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree with that. And I think you're only able to do both if you're in touch with both. So again, that's why I think it's important to have a mental health outlet, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's therapy or yoga or playing basketball or pickleball, whatever. Talking to somebody, having something that allows you to tap into the both and for yourself, I think is important for you to be able to fully show up in that way that you're talking about. Yeah, I won't get into the political thoughts that I have, but
you've taken on other work beyond just the Mad Hatter Gala. You've taken on leadership of the legislative committee at SAC. How do you see policy and advocacy playing a role in shaping safer communities?
I said I wasn't going to go there, but you teed me up. So,
well, I will. I'll give you a different lane that you can follow.
Sure.
In that, and I think this is a mistake that people make often, is that they see policy and political as one and the same. I think that they are first cousins to each other.
Yeah.
But I think that there are ways in which you need to and can have distinct conversations about both.
Yeah.
And if you're going to develop good, thoughtful policy solutions, I think you need to be aware of the political context.
Yeah.
I think if you are operating in a political context, you need to be aware of the policy solutions that are in the zeitgeist. But it doesn't mean that the two are completely and totally reliant on the other. That we've seen, and I've been a part of, political wins that challenge the policy of the day. And I've been part of policy wins that push against the political moments. And it's possible to do both. So if you want to think about specifically just the policy component and how you make that case and what would be the best scenario in your mind and in the context of the SAC and its leadership committee, what are those policy platforms and how do you see it and advocacy around those things having an impact irrespective of the political environment?
Such a good question. I want to make sure I frame my answer appropriately. So I'm new to the legislative committee. I served on it last year. I'm chairing it this year. I attended SAC's Day on the Hill, which is a day where we all go to Capitol Hill and go meet with our constituents and basically say, hey, this is what SAC does. Here's a couple of the bills that you'll probably be voting on soon. Here's why it's important to us. And so we went and did that in April. It was it was an incredible event. I was like, oh, I love this. It was like the biggest turnout ever. I think more and more people are tuning in and saying, hey, how can I help? How do we get in front of these political leaders to make sure that our best interests as a community are being served? And so I think the way that we consider policy from an advocacy standpoint is to always, of course, keep it people first, survivor first, mission first, whatever needs to be served as the top priority. But also on, I think, education and understanding, like when you're going to these rooms with people, they might have different backgrounds than you, different political beliefs than you, but you're there to serve a mission and you're there to help people. And honestly, so are they. I was very pleased with the conversations that I had on the Day of the Hill. I hope I get to have more. I think people genuinely want to help. I think that some of them just need to understand better. And the fact of the matter that I've learned, especially like in this work, and especially with sexual violence, no one really understands that unless they've been through it. Like, not really. And so when there are certain bills that are being passed that are aiming to support survivors, and it's very important to hear testimony for those individuals voting on what that's like. And that's challenging to do for survivors, right? Or for anyone going through a traumatic event, is to get in front of a room full of senators and congressmen and be like, here's why this is important to me. But it's really powerful. I think of my friend Danielle, had a very unfortunate experience with the judicial system after her sexual assault. And she went to the DA and said, how can we fix this? How can we make this better? She's like, oh, well, you can change the law. And she did. So there's Danielle's law now, which extended the years you have to file a civil suit against someone who sexually assaults you from 1 year to 3 to 5 years. That's huge. So I think the power of the people coming together and be like, hey, that's not working. How can we fix it? And then taking the time to go and share that with the people who are making those decisions and voting on those bills is very, very important. And it's possible. It's never forget that, like, they work for the people. So it's important to be in their office and advocating for what's important to you, to move that mission forward and to see the real change that you want to see not only in our community, but across the state.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of wisdom there as well, that it's important to remember that lawmakers, their staff, others are people too. Mm-hmm. And if advocates for any cause can make it easy to approach the problem and then easy to understand the solutions, doesn't mean you're going to win. Right. But it's a heck of a lot better than throwing tomatoes.
I think you got to try too.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've said today and before that everyone has a story to tell, and that embracing your own story can be a powerful force for change. What advice do you have for people and leaders who want to make a difference but don't yet know where to start?
I would say identifying what really matters to you. So we are inundated every day with a million problems on our phones. It comes to us through social media or the news or, whatever. The phone is constantly telling us the things that are wrong in the world. And so it's really easy to feel overwhelmed, and it's really easy to go, I can't fix any of this. I'm going to put my head in the sand and just hope for the best. And if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. I'm not here to judge and say that that's the wrong thing to do, because I understand how overwhelming it can be. But if you are someone who wants to make a change and you want to feel like you're working towards the solution, I think identifying within yourself what feels most true and what feels most authentic about whatever cause you have. It could be DV, it could be animal rights, it could be the environment, whatever feels true to you because you've lived it in some way, makes you perfectly designed to help for that problem and to make a difference with that problem. And that's powerful, because it goes from, instead of being like, maybe you've experienced homelessness, it's like, instead of having this story about being on the streets and not having a home, you're able to uniquely serve those in the same position and really sit with those people and say, I understand because I've been there. And that's a very, very powerful thing, to sit with someone in their pain and say, I understand your suffering uniquely because I've been there. And I also have ideas and thoughts on how we can make this problem better or solved. And I think that's how real change comes about. And it starts with every single one of us in very small ways, from volunteering, like I said, maybe in an art room, organizing something, or giving a $10 donation. Every little bit counts, and it's very, very important.
I was in Mass last weekend, and our priest, Father Joe, was giving a homily, and as he does, he is often moved by an experience or a story that kind of pops into his head. And he was sharing a story about Room in the Inn. And we will host gentlemen during the winter months at our parish, as many other churches do. He was telling a story about an individual that was volunteering at Room in the Inn at our parish and serving some meals. And he looks over, and this gentleman is in a robust, highly animated conversation in a friendly way with one of the individuals, the guests at the church. And Father Joe walks up to him after. He says, "How did you find a way to talk to that guy in such friendly and familiar ways?" And because it was like he was seeing, his, a cousin or an uncle that he hadn't seen in quite a while. And he said, "Well, Father Joe, I've been there and I know what it's like." And his ability to identify with the guest of our parish at that night made a huge impact, not only on the people we were serving, but it also made an impact on our parish priest, who then decided to share that story with about 3,800 families over the course of a weekend. The hope then being that people start to see the same sort of thing that you're talking about, that you can show up, you can just do the small thing. There's no deed too small. I love that framing. And whether through volunteering or donations or sharing a story, you've really emphasized the power of showing up as incredibly impactful. What are things that organizations you think could do to make it easier or invite folks to be more engaged in that process? My perspective is that it could sometimes seem like a challenge or a barrier to overcome. You may be different. You said, "You know what? I'm just going to go to this place. I'm going to walk into the art room." There may be 10 other folks, whether it's the SAC or a library or wherever, that may feel burdened or challenged to kind of just walk up to the front desk. How do you think organizations can make it easier to invite that person to just show up and do the small thing?
That's a great question. I think being out in the community that they serve is really important. So I speak a lot about SAC because it's my experience, right? So like we have specific outreach teams to reach the most marginalized communities in our city who are most impacted by sexual violence. And I think we make a big effort to have a presence in those communities so that they can get service. I think that's also important to show up so that people are aware that the organization exists and they can help if they want to become an advocate or, whatever they may be able to do. So I think being out in the communities in which nonprofits serve is very important, sharing about what they do and why it's important. I think there's so many wonderful organizations in Nashville that serve so many different causes. Like I met a gentleman one time who worked for an organization where they repaired bikes for people and taught people how to ride bikes. I was like, that's great. I would have never known that exists, but I can see why that would have a great reason to exist. Like maybe someone wants to do that. So I think getting the name out there, getting the brand out there, connecting with people, going to different networking events. I feel like networking is almost like a cringe word sometimes. It certainly has made my stomach turn every now and again, but it is really important. So having representatives from the organizations go to YLC is a great organization that connects with nonprofits all over the city and saying like, how can we get involved to meet people that are already interested in helping a nonprofit? Like, how can we get in front of them more? So I think just networking and being involved in the communities that they serve is like a good way to like open the door to say like, it's not that scary. Come on in.
What is something that you think people might misunderstand about your journey in the corporate and nonprofit space? And how can leaders who identify with you power their work?
I don't know what might be misunderstood other than it is challenging and it is very rewarding. And I think maybe it's a misunderstanding that it's taken a lot of work to get here. I guess I'll say that. Very meaningful work that I've done both on myself and just within the organization. But And I'm proud of the work that I've done on myself, but it goes very deep, and it's been a long journey. I think that if leaders want to resonate with leading with authenticity and empathy and being themselves when they're sharing a story or whatever it may be, it's focusing on the connection that you have with people and not so much maybe trying to tell the perfect story. So it doesn't have to be marketed and polished and like really well thought out. It's just more like, how can you have a conversation with someone that feels deep and meaningful and as vulnerable as you're comfortable with, to open the door for better connection and I think better leadership.
I'd love to close with a little bit of a non-traditional question and speak not necessarily to organizational leaders, but folks who may be listening today who are survivors of any variety of trauma or violence. When you think about the survivors and the community that you serve, what do you hope that your leadership or your story inspires them to believe or to do?
I love that question. I would hope that it inspires them to believe that if they are not in a good place, that a good place is not only possible, but extremely likely and within reach. I hope that it inspires them that a painful chapter does not have to be a painful ending. And that we always have the agency, even if it feels like it's been taken from us, we always have the agency to make a different decision. And that sharing and finding connection is how I think you feel empowered to take that agency back. Because it dispels the shame and whatever power that situation had over you. And then you get to like step forward into the life you were always meant to have and deserve.
A huge thank you to Alex Nelson for joining me today. Alex's story reminds us that our greatest impact often comes when we embrace our own story, lead with empathy, and show up for others. Her leadership is proof that vulnerability can be a strength, and that aligning our gifts with a cause greater than ourselves can change lives. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and a review and share it with someone who would find it valuable. We've got more amazing guests coming this season, so be sure to subscribe to Catalysts for Change wherever you get your podcasts, or visit us at catalystsforchangepod.com. Before we close, a quick note. Today's conversation included a discussion of sexual assault and domestic violence. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual violence, know that you are not alone and that support is available. In Nashville, you can reach the Nashville Sexual Assault Center at 1-866-811-RISE. Anywhere in the United States, you can call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673 to be connected with a trained staff member from a sexual assault provider in your area. If you are in immediate danger, please dial 911. Taking the step to reach out can feel scary, but there are people ready to listen, believe you, and help you take the next step forward. Thanks again for listening to Catalysts for Change, brought to you in part by the Southern Research Collaborative. Until next time, I'm Adam Lister, and I'll see you soon.